Penguin Random House Audio presents Back After This, a novel. This is the author, Linda Holmes. For Jessica, Mike, Hafsa, Liz, Ramel, Candace, Nick and Lauren, Jess, and Mike again. Author's note. This is a story about people who love audio. I think it's only fair to the people I work with to be perfectly clear that it is not a story about my own career, nor is it a veiled expose. I know a lot of audio people, but the ones in this book are truly and fully fictional, even if the difficulties of navigating the media landscape are soberingly real. There are things you can do to make it less terrifying. If you choose to be in an employment relationship, get a union, stuff like that. So nobody in the book maps directly to anybody in real life, and Palmetto Media is not based on any real place in particular. How much work goes into your favorite podcast, however, is the absolute truth. Prologue, 2 a.m. The trick was not to be noisy. Slowly as I could manage, I turned my head until I could see his face in the blade of streetlight that came in between the bedroom curtains. His eyes were closed and his mouth was slack and open, which was both how he slept and how he kissed, and he was not quite snoring. I moved inch by inch, sitting up, removing my weight from the bed bit by bit, and waiting to make sure he didn't stir. Then I tiptoed out into the living room and opened my laptop. We had finished an edit before we went to bed. It was an episode about a woman whose car was stolen, and when she went shopping on Craigslist for a replacement, someone tried to sell it back to her. I had done all the interviews, with her at her cramped apartment in Columbia Heights, with her sister at the bar where she worked, with a cop at a diner, with the seller at the sketchy lot where he swore to me that he'd had no idea it was stolen when he bought it. I had written the intro. There's something about having something stolen from you that is just infuriating. That's my stuff, you think to yourself. How can you take my stuff? That's my stuff. I paid for that stuff. It bugs you. It nags at you. It makes it hard to concentrate on anything else. Even if what you lost isn't worth that much, how can anybody believe that they can take what's yours? Today, I'm going to introduce you to Casey, a woman who felt exactly that helpless, and then, somehow, it got worse. I had written it, but he had tracked it. We didn't use my voice on the podcast. At the station where we both had day jobs, I'd done only a handful of things on air, and I'd started to avoid it so I wouldn't have to get a bunch of emails about what was wrong with the way I talked. I'd once spent about 15 minutes retracking a single line in a studio because the veteran editor in the booth insisted my voice was frying on the last syllable. I read it again and again. He didn't get any happier. I told him, I think that's just my voice. And he sighed. I guess it is. So Justin was the host. He was the voice. I did most of the research and interviews. We split the producing, although he was usually satisfied before I was. I'd say I thought the episode needed one more pass, and he'd say it was fine, and I'd say okay, and then I'd do one more pass on my own. This is why I had crawled out of bed. We wanted to publish tomorrow morning, and we'd run late with the edit. It was my last chance. I put my headphones on and brought up the episode on the laptop. I was pretty sure that the problem was in the middle, around the transition into the interview at the sales lot. I played the same minute back 4 times. It started with Casey saying, I needed a car, I couldn't be without a car, and I was in a rush, and that's probably why I went there in the first place. And then Justin's voice. When Casey says there, she means Smithson and Son, the lot 3 blocks from her apartment. What it lacked in customer satisfaction, it made up for in convenience. And then Doug, the car salesman. I pride myself on making things easy for the customer. You need something, we're right there. I didn't like it, but I couldn't figure out what I didn't like about it. After 4 listens, though, I heard it. We didn't need Justin's second sentence. What it lacked in customer satisfaction, it made up for in convenience. I snipped it out and cleaned up the edges of the cut. When I played it back, the rhythm was much better to my ear. I saved it and closed the laptop. In the bedroom, he hadn't moved an inch. I lowered myself onto the bed, ounce by ounce, and just as I slid in beside him, he took a big inhale, stirred a bit, but didn't wake up. For a while, I lay there facing him, looking at the bar of light on his cheek. I knew he was the only person who could ever understand why I would get up in the middle of the night to cut 4.63 seconds from a 22-minute podcast episode that we were making out of our apartment. Not that I was going to tell him unless he brought it up. That was before I lost the guy, lost the apartment, lost the show. I even lost the bed. But I was right about that cut. Chapter 1. The Pitch. In Studio D, I was trying to record a short intro that should have taken less than 15 minutes. The board in front of me was lit up, the mic lights were green, my headphones were on, and the host was in the chair on the other side of the glass. I pressed my talk button. "Tell me what you had for breakfast." "Well," Miles began, leaning intimately toward the microphone as if I were really asking. "I had an omelet, 4 eggs, goat cheese, and arugula. Oh, and a diced tomato." He knew that one purpose of this exercise was to make sure his peas didn't pop unpleasantly at the poor public, but he managed to never eat anything for breakfast with peas in it. No potatoes, no pepper, no prosciutto, or pancakes. "I've never known anybody who eats as many eggs as he does," Julie muttered from the chair next to me in the booth, firing up her laptop. "I'm never sure whether he actually smells like eggs or whether I just think he smells like eggs because I look at him and I can't stop thinking about eggs." I pressed my button again. "I need to hear some peas, Miles." "Oh," he said, always freshly surprised months into production. "Peter Piper." I heard Julie moan in the corner. "A few more than that, please," I told him, "and back off the mic about an inch. You don't need to swallow it, as we've talked about before." I looked over at Julie. "Too much?" I asked. She nudged her glasses up on her nose. She must have gotten a late start with her daughter and not had time for her contacts. "Nah, I think it's charming how every day is like the first day. He's like a newborn baby." "Pizza," he said. "Pickles, popcorn, Sergeant Pepper, Yellow Submarine." How had he gotten lost over the course of 7 words? "Right," I muttered. I fiddled with the sliders and talked to him again. "Okay, go ahead on the intro, please." Miles had come to audio from one of the biggest newspapers in the country, where he'd won the biggest awards in journalism for reporting on the biggest corruption scandal in the history of his state. My boss, Toby, had been perched atop a mountain of investor money, jonesing for respect after getting Palmetto on the map with a pulpy true crime podcast and an addictive series of marital infidelity confessionals. He was trying to keep the place on track after Rob, his co-founder, who had recruited me, cashed out. Toby had snapped Miles up like a blue ribbon hog at the state fair, bidding and bidding until the competition threw up its hands. The paper could, after all, hire 3 young reporters, or 12 interns, for what it would cost them to keep Miles, which was easy math for people who now worked for venture capitalists. So Miles Banfield became a podcast host, interviewing newsmakers, presenting some of his own reporting, and delivering commentaries that Julie and I would cut down from 7 or 8 minutes to a tight 2.5. He was very bad at it. He made mouth noises, tisks and gulps and smacks of all kinds while other people were talking. He would overlap the first few words of the next question with the final few words of the last answer, which signaled his impatience and rattled guests. He asked the same question in different ways 4 times in a row. He refused to read any of the research Julie stayed up late creating for him and then told Toby we hadn't prepared him. He would spend most of a half-hour interview asking a prolific author about the dedication in a single mid-career book, ignoring our efforts to interrupt, sometimes pointedly taking off his headphones. He clattered his watch on the table every time I didn't remind him to take it off. He hummed tunelessly while I was trying to solve technical problems. I couldn't get him to improve his active listening past an obnoxious oh, which he occasionally unleashed 10 times in the same interview.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?